Hello everyone, my name is Moran Harari and I would like to introduce you today to the Financial Secrecy Index. So first, I would like to explain on the structure of the index and its objectives. Then I will explain why the FSI is not a tax haven list. And finally, I would mention what exactly the FSI includes apart from the ranking. Okay, so the Financial Secrecy Index, or FSI in short, has been published by the Tax Justice Network since 2009 on a biannual basis. So it's a tool for understanding global financial secrecy and tax haven illicit financial flows. It ranks jurisdictions according to their contribution to opacity in international finance. And it's a long-term project. So we started in 2009 with 60 jurisdictions, and we increased the number every 2 years. And today we launched the 2018 index with 112 jurisdictions. And we aim eventually to assess all jurisdictions in the world. So here you can see the top-ranked jurisdiction, top ranking, and the ranking that we published every launch. And the changes. So by providing clear pointers for policy change, the FSI allows us to track the progress or the deterioration of the jurisdiction's transparency along the years. The FSI has two broad goals. The first one is research. So we collect and analyze data on the way jurisdictions facilitate illicit financial flows. And that way we create a huge database freely accessible to the public. And this for FSI, we also provided it in an open data format. The second goal is impact. We monitor the changes that jurisdictions make towards transparency along the years. And by engaging with the media and with public officials and civil society organizations, we aim to have an impact on policy change. This is an example for some of the media coverage we had in 2015. So usually every launch we have media pickup, but also on a constant basis, and not only journalists, a lot of others use the FSI, like NGOs and researchers, tax authorities, central banks, rating agencies, and even law enforcement agencies for money laundering and tax abuse risk assessment. So the FSI ranks jurisdiction according to their secrecy and their offshore financial scale of their offshore financial activities. So it has two components. The first one is the qualitative one, which is the secrecy score. It means how much opacity each of the jurisdictions offers to non-residents. The quantitative component is the market share, which means the market share, the financial services that a jurisdiction offers to non-residents. And the weighting of these two components according to a specific formula leads to the FSI value according to which we rank the jurisdictions. Now, the reason the FSI focuses on non-residents is because no jurisdiction would like its citizens to evade tax or commit crimes. But almost all jurisdictions would like to attract foreign money, and some of them have little concern whether this money is illicit or not, especially when the consequences of it are committed elsewhere. Now, the secrecy score is based on 20 indicators related to four main themes: ownership registration, legal entity transparency, integrity of tax and financial regulation, and international standards and cooperation. So until 2018, this time that we launched the index, the FSI was based on 15 indicators. However, in 2016, we have done an in-depth review of the FSI methodology, and after a long process, which involved a survey of stakeholders and a statistical independent audit of the EU Research Centre, we have added 7 indicators, new ones. As you see here, they are marked in red. And we also made some significant changes to the current other indicators. Now, we assessed the indicators according to the lowest available in transparency denominators, and I will try to expand it on the next slide. Let's take, for example, indicator number 3 on company ownership. So as you can see here, an individual can be the real owner of the company here in green. He can do that directly or through a structure of additional vehicles like nominee directors and trusts. So here we check whether the jurisdiction obliges all limited companies to register the legal owners and their beneficial owners, or whether they can be incorporated without registration. And we also check what are the details they have to register, the name, the address, the date of birth, and whether they have bearer shares or not. And if we find that there is a certain type of limited company that is not subject to the requirement of registration, then we consider a secretive score for this indicator. Now, the global scale weight, the calculation of the jurisdiction share in the global market, create a ranking of a jurisdiction's importance in the total global trade of financial services. And how do we calculate it? We get the value by dividing the country's export of financial services in the sum of all world export of financial services. And as I mentioned, by weighting this value with the secrecy score, we get the FSI value of the ranking. So this is the list of the top 25 jurisdictions on the 2018 index. And we consider them the largest contributors to global financial secrecy. Now, one may ask, why actually do we need to combine the secrecy score with the global scale weight? Why is it not enough to rank the jurisdiction only according to their secrecy score? So, while it is true that a really opaque legal system of a small jurisdiction has the potential to be extremely damaging, the consequences in practice are lessened if not many people use the jurisdiction to avoid tax or hide their identity. Now, in contrast, major financial services that attract deposit and incorporation of many entities around the world, they may have dreadful consequences for illicit financial flows, even if their secrecy provisions are not as bad as those small jurisdictions. So as you can see here, the yellow calendar has small holes, which means not a very big secrecy, but it has a major financial center because it's big and it has a lot of money in it. And the small red one has big holes in it, which means its secrecy provisions are quite extreme. So to emphasize that, you can see on the left side the current top 10 jurisdiction on the index. This is based on their FSI value. And you can see that the total share of market financial services is 58%, which is very big, very high. And the FSI share, which is the secrecy actually provided in the world, is 32%. Now, if we take the 10 jurisdiction and we rank them according to their secrecy score only, we get we'll see that the global scale weight of them is very low. It's only 0.35%, and their FSI share is only 8.31%. Which leads me to the next slide, where we explain why the FSI is not a tax haven list. So when we think of tax haven, we usually don't think of OECD countries. We think of small palm islands, either in the Pacific or in the Caribbean, and we consider them as the main source of tax evasion and avoidance. So in the middle here, you can see the top 10 jurisdictions on the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes that the EU published recently. On the right, it's the only country that the OECD, the Global Forum, consider as non-compliant. And here on the left, it's the top 10 jurisdiction of Financial Secrecy Index. Now, we've calculated the secrecy score and the FSI value of the countries that we assess, which appear also in the EU list and the OECD. Now, as you can see, the EU and the OECD point fingers at jurisdictions that may indeed be more secretive than the top 10 jurisdictions that we have on the Financial Secrecy Index. But is that really where action is most urgently needed? If Trinidad and Tobago and the other jurisdictions on the EU list become more or fully transparent, the global financial secrecy would be reduced only by almost 3%. This is because all these jurisdictions have only 0.15% of the market of offshore financial services. In contrast, if the top 10 jurisdictions of Financial Secrecy Index become more transparent, the impact would be huge, because these are responsible for almost a third, as you can see here, of all global financial secrecy. And they represent almost 60% of offshore financial services. Furthermore, it is if the US or Switzerland or other major financial centers become more transparent, maybe that would also push other countries to follow them, and so the impact would be even greater. Now, additional reasons why the FSI is not a tax haven list. Because tax haven lists consist of binary blacklists or whitelists, suggesting that a jurisdiction is either a tax haven or it is not. And if it is not, it means that it probably poses no risk to financial transparency whatsoever. Now, the FSI chooses a different approach. It does not attempt to determine a cutoff line to identify tax havens, but rather we consider that all jurisdiction is somewhere on the spectrum within full transparency and full opacity, according to the degree in different fields like banking secrecy or company registration, etc. In addition, the FSI is entirely transparent and relies on objectively verifiable criteria. This is different from most tax havens, which are based usually on the indicators are either unknown or discretionary, and therefore they are often subject to political pressure. For example, in 2015, the EU published its tax haven list, which was basically a jurisdiction that had been included in the national tax haven list of at least 10 EU countries. Now, as a consequence, traditional tax havens like Bermuda started lobbying national government to convince them to be removed from the list, so to be under the 10 countries thresholds. And as you can see here, Bermuda was successful in this process, both with Latvia and with Poland. Now, what does the FSI include apart from the ranking, which you see here? We have narrative reports for for a top 10 jurisdiction and many more. We have technical reports, very detailed one for each jurisdiction we assess. And here it's not only the indicators that we refer to, it's also other issues like the tax system and GDP composition and others. And this year, as I mentioned, we provide these technical reports also in open data format, so you can download them from our website, which is the next one we have. We have detailed methodology and frequent asked questions and much more things. And this year we also published interactive detailed map where you can play with the secrecy score and the FSI value and also the 20 key indicators for every jurisdiction. Thank you very much. We invite you to have a look on our website, and if you have any feedback, please leave it on the contact tab. Goodbye.